If you recall a while back, I made a video dedicated to the worst NES movie-based games that I played, and I played all of them. It was a labor of love. But it's so easy to sit down and complain about how those were the worst, so what if we took the time to talk about the games that were the best? That's the topic of today's episode, my top 10 best NES movie-based games. Now I will say there were many bad ones, so all things considered, in most cases, this is the best of the worst. Let's begin. This is a rough one. I don't expect you to like it because even I barely liked it. For those of you who don't know what Dick Tracy is, it's a comic strip written by Chester Gould, and it became relevant in pop culture pretty significantly. There were tons of games, comics, you name it, they made it. Now the NES game was created by Real Time Associates, and if you know anything about them, there isn't a singular fucking thing they did that was remotely fun to like 50% of the planet. In fact, I hate them for Gex 64 alone. Why stop there? How about Real Monsters on the Super Nintendo? What about Iron Man and Exo Manowar? Or Bug? Maybe I'm getting a little bit excited. But Dick Tracy on the NES, it's not bad, but it isn't good, right? We play as Dick Tracy going up against all of these goons from the comic strip, and we get a particular goon to go after. We get clues, and then we travel around a pseudo open world map, and while we're traveling that, we're getting sniped at, so that's always a great time. There were at least 10 different ports of various Dick Tracy games, and maybe, if you're lucky, you'll find one that you enjoy. This is another one that'll make you scrunch your eyebrows, and I don't blame you, it wasn't fun. But I love the movie it was based off of, and we play as Eddie Valent, engaging in one of the more obnoxious scavenger hunts that are on the NES. While the game is going on, Judge Doom is sending his weasels after you, and if they catch you, you need to be witty and answer a riddle correctly, otherwise they kill you. It's loosely based on the movie, and to be honest, the idea of Bob Hoskins powering up a punch to nail some stranger in the face is the perfect cathartic offset needed to maintain the focus to beat this. All of the locations in the movie are present, like Los Angeles and Toontown, and eventually we find pieces of the will, and if we need help, we can go to the Ink and Paint Club and ask Jessica Rabbit for a hint. I will tell you though, it's not going to be fun, and I 100% suggest that you use a guide for this one. It'll save you tons of ass pain. There were a few different games based on the film, but 1991's Who Framed Roger Rabbit was the last one, and it was a Game Boy title from Capcom. Little trivia fact for you, it was one of Shinji Mikami's first games, long before he messed around with Resident Evil. For a long time, I hated this game, and I was right in hating it. It's not a great game, at least in how it's presented. But during my LJN Conquest, I did play it, and I beat it. Many of you are going to go into this game thinking, I walk around, then an alarm blares, my weapon sucks, kids are dying, I can't read the map, what do? Oh hey, it's Jason. Now I'm dead. And that's a genuine experience if you play this. You need to sit down and actually learn how this game functions because it's actually quite neat. There are locked doors, unique spawn locations for items, and worst comes the worst, just use a map or guide so you know where they spawn. After that, you need to learn how to abuse Jason. He has a very predictable pattern, and if you discover where the pitchfork is, you'll get him. Developed by Pack-In Video, I was worried that this one wouldn't be fun, and I do have mixed feelings about it. I find it to be monotonous, but I also found Zelda 2 to be monotonous, and honestly, I think the devs spent a little time playing Zelda 2 because it reminds me of it in execution. We play as John Rambo. Oh! John, what's wrong with your face? He looks more like a Punch-Out character, doesn't he? It's supposed to align with First Blood 2, Rambo, but you end up going around a really jagged maze, using only a knife, at least for the first part, fighting wasps, snakes, and eventually Murdoch, before we throw a massive Ikari kanji at him and turn him into a frog. Now, I've never seen the movie this is based on, but something tells me there wasn't any weeb shit in it, right? That doesn't strike me as Stallone's style of attack. If you have the patience to get through the maze, maybe map it out and take the time to learn the curve for this, you might find that you enjoy it. The most recent Rambo game was in 2014, and it was a rail shooter, Rambo the video game. Alright, good news. We've passed the event horizon of bullshit. Somehow we've escaped, and now we're working our way up. Now, Jaws has a reputation for being a bad game, and while the AVGN made an episode making fun of it, I honestly didn't mind it. Jaws is a simple game. It's rather straightforward. Collect shells by killing crabs and stingrays, upgrade your ship, eventually we take on Jaws, and then we kill Jaws. If you take the time to learn how to play Jaws, you might enjoy it. You know, it's the same as Rambo. Off the bat, it might seem wonky, but that wonkiness plays into the charm of the experience. The absurdity of the game makes it fun. Jaws is still an IP of interest to those who hold the rights to it, and I honestly wouldn't be surprised if we had another Jaws movie in the future, but as far as games go, the last proper Jaws game was Jaws Unleashed in 2006. I have never seen a Gremlins movie, yet I still know the rules. Don't feed them after midnight, don't get them wet, and don't let them see bright lights. No clue where I learned it, don't remember anybody telling it to me, but I know of it. And apparently a lot of people didn't follow said rules because there's 2 movies and 2 video games for the franchise. The first Gremlins game was on the Atari 2600, but Gremlins 2 was on the NES, and it's a great time. It's definitely worth checking out. Sunsoft was in charge of creating it, and if you know Sunsoft, you know their games can be donkey shit, right? But people like Naoki Kodaka come in with their saucy jams and save the day. We play as Gizmo, we go through a building with tons of novelty weapons to wipe out all the gremlins inside, and I can't attest to the accuracy of the film because I've never seen it, but the game is actually pretty fun. Ghostbusters. Oh boy, did Ghostbusters have a zinger of a time on the NES or what? Ghostbusters 1, it's a labor of unlove. Not even a labor of love. You will hate yourself for playing Ghostbusters 1. It's just a dreadful game. And guess what? Ghostbusters 2, just as bad. So let's get a company that we know won't shit the bed and historically didn't. HAL Labs. The same people who made Kirby to create a new Ghostbusters game, new Ghostbusters 2. Now this game is a departure from what we've come to expect from Ghostbusters, which isn't much. The bar is so low that even a tardigrade can't limbo it, right? Instead of the nonsense, we have a decent challenge. We can choose from the 4 Ghostbusters or an optional 5th one, Louis Tully, their accountant. Believe it or not, I've actually seen Ghostbusters 1 and 2. Shocking, huh? We walk around rooms and trap ghosts, and at the end of a stage, we fight a boss. It's a simple time waster, and I did enjoy it. This was a refreshing game to check out. Historically speaking, my past experiences with Batman games, they haven't been that great. The first Batman game was an isometric platformer akin to Solstice, which featured a morbidly obese Batman who jingles when he walks. And the second game was a DOS game where existence was pain. Literally, my health and timer were the same thing. So I've been looking forward to this one for a while. Plot-wise, it is very loosely based on the 1989 movie, but the thing that really made it badass is just how flexible Batman is as a character, especially in a platforming environment. Batman doesn't just throw batarangs and punch bad guys in the dick, he has a grappling hook, and he can do wall jumps, that to date, I had only seen in Ninja Gaiden. While I did dip my toes into it for the sake of this episode, I'm excited to actually play a good Batman game. Well, Batman Returns was a great film and kickstarted my expectations for women in my life. Michelle Pfeiffer, she's a baddie, isn't she? And as far as the movie goes, I enjoyed Batman Returns just as much as the original Batman, and it came out on a great year, 1992, the year I was born. But I'd wager to say you care more about the movie than when I was sent down the hypertunnel, so let's talk about it. In contrast to Batman, which was created by Sunsoft, Batman Returns was made by Konami. It's also not a platformer, but instead a beat 'em up. Now to me, both of the Batman games I've mentioned today, they're great, simply great, wonderful games, and Batman Returns alone reminds me of a better Double Dragon, like Konami did what Technos couldn't do, and I appreciate that. It's also fairly faithful to the film as well, with 6 stages of great dick-kicking action. The more I played these, the more I realized I had a shitty childhood. There were tons of cool movies that came out, and Willow is one of them. My dad isn't alive anymore, so if you're over the age of 40 and watching this video, do me a solid and go into the comments sections and scold me. Nothing mean, no anger, just disappointment. Willow the game though, banger. Absolute banger, perhaps one of the greatest action RPGs on the NES. It's basically The Legend of Zelda. Well, I mean, it is a Zelda clone. Why bother sugarcoating it? But hey, if Capcom's gonna rip off Nintendo, you can count on it being great. Capcom is one of those companies that did wonderful work during their NES era. I've been toying with the idea of making a video concerning my top 10 companies for a particular console, and honestly, if that's something that you want to see, let me know down below. Now, the game puts us in the role of Willow Ufgood. We control the forces of evil using the standard objects that would be available in the fantasy quest, like shields, spells, swords, etc. We level up, we take on the world, and everything we need, we can find it in the wild. I was kind of intrigued to see no in-game currency in an action RPG. It's a badass little game though. Irem accomplished a lot during their start in the arcades. One of the big games that really drew attention to them was Kung Fu Master, which was created as Spartan X in Japan. When it came time to port the arcade game, they created Kung Fu, which was one of the first 30 NES games. Now, what's interesting about Kung Fu is that it is very loosely based on Wheels on Meals, a Jackie Chan film. Like, loosely, right? They took creative liberty, and that's okay. Kung Fu is hands down one of the best early NES games out there, and it's easy too. You can breeze through it, and it's historically important, because many people consider it to be one of the first brawler games in the genre, and I respect that tremendously. Out of all of the movie-based games I played, I was the most impressed by Capcom's take on The Little Mermaid. It's a game that my kids enjoy. It's fun, easy to pick up, and it's a good time the entire time. There's really not any moments in it where you don't know what to do or how to progress, and that's a good thing. It follows the plot of the Disney film. We swim underwater, shooting bubbles to trap our enemies, and using the same trapped enemies as weapons to kill other enemies. There are tons of hidden objects, many of which are hidden in nooks and crannies that are accessible. And with 6 simple stages, this is one that I can strongly recommend. There's also a Game Boy version, but I've never messed with it. But the NES version, I stand by it 100%, and if it can make my child smile, that's worth its weight in gold. The most recent game to solely revolve around Ariel's escapades in the Great Blue Sea was The Little Mermaid Pinball in 2005, and it's kind of gimmicky, but what do you expect? It's pinball on the computer. And that's it for today's list. How did you feel about it? Were there any movie-based games on the NES that brought you joy in your childhood or even recently in your adulthood? I'd love to hear about it down below, and I know the community would as well. Movie-based games are a point of conversation, and there were tons of them on the NES, some good, some bad. Also, if you made it to the end of this video, you're already home with us. Feel free to subscribe and join the constantly evolving and dynamic family we've created in the last few months. Finally, the most important thing you can do for me is to hit that thumbs up button, as it directly impacts the visibility of the projects and the videos that I work on every single day. As always, from my family to your family, good energy, good vibes, Fortefyre out.